In the world of the living, few things are more inescapable than bureaucracy. The endless forms, the red stamps, the documents filed, sealed, and archived. But in the Chinese afterlife, a realm governed not by chaos but by structure, bureaucracy reigns just as ruthlessly. The dead are not simply souls floating in the void. They are processed, judged, assigned roles, and if necessary, punished. And like all properly managed systems, it requires documentation. In ancient China, a person's fate after death was not determined solely by their moral conduct, but by how well the living performed the proper rituals, and crucially, whether the correct paperwork accompanied them into the spirit realm. Registers had to be copied. Labels had to be affixed. In some cases, paper passports were burned to facilitate safe passage through the underworld. The wrong document, or none at all, could mean wandering eternally as a hungry ghost. Our second episode opens the dusty drawers of the spirit world's filing cabinets. We will explore how ancient Chinese conceptions of the afterlife evolved into an intricate bureaucracy, mirroring the structures of empire. We will examine the grim majesty of the 10 courts of hell, the role of spirit registers and ghost officials, and the fascinating practice of burning demon paper, documents sent by flame, carried by smoke to the offices of the dead. This is not metaphor. This is metaphysics in ink and ash. To understand the bureaucracy of the dead, we must first examine the Chinese worldview that made it inevitable, the belief that the cosmos was structured like an empire. In early Chinese thought, particularly under the influence of Confucianism and legalism during the Han Dynasty, the universe was imagined as a great hierarchy. At its apex was heaven, Tian, the celestial authority. Below it, the son of heaven, the emperor, governed the human realm. Beneath him stretched a vast network of ministers, officials, scribes, and clerks who kept the machinery of empire running. But this structure did not end at death. The underworld, known by many names, Diu, the earth prisons, Yudu, the dark capital, was conceived as a realm with its own hierarchy, its own administration. It had judges, wardens, registrars, and even executioners. The dead filed in like new arrivals to a government office. Their names were checked against the spirit register. Their deeds were reviewed. Their sentences were handed down. Appeals could be made. Bribes, ritual offerings could be submitted. And every action required paperwork. This bureaucratic model of the afterlife did not emerge fully formed. It evolved gradually, absorbing elements from Daoism, popular religion, ancestor worship, and later, Buddhism. But by the Tang Dynasty, the image of an afterlife governed like an empire was fully entrenched. And just like in any earthly bureau, there were forms to fill out, and people who specialized in filling them. One of the most important concepts in the Chinese afterlife is the life and death register, Shengxibu, the heavenly ledger that records the name, birth date, and death date of every living being. It is said to be maintained by a divine bureaucrat known as the Siming, the director of destinies. Siming operates like a cosmic administrator. He ensures that people live out their allotted lifespans, and when the time comes, he arranges for their names to be transferred from the Book of the Living to the Book of the Dead. Daoist texts from the late Han and Six Dynasties periods describe him as a celestial scribe, often invoked in rituals seeking to extend life or avert death, by requesting the amendment of one's entry in the register. In this belief lies a profoundly bureaucratic notion that death is not arbitrary but scheduled, and that it can be renegotiated through proper channels. In funerary contexts, families would often create spirit registers, wooden or paper tablets upon which the name and birth information of the deceased was written. These were used to summon the spirit for offerings and to ensure that the soul arrived in the afterlife with proper identification. Without a name and date of birth, the dead risked being treated as nameless ghosts, spirits without status, uncared for, and potentially malevolent. But if the spirit world is bureaucratic, then how does correspondence travel between realms? The answer is both simple and poetic: burning. From at least the Han Dynasty onward, it became common practice to burn objects for the dead. These included not only material items, paper replicas of clothes, houses, and currency, but also documents. These might be letters to ancestors, petitions to underworld officials, or even legal appeals. Known generically today as joss paper or spirit money, these offerings were often elaborately printed or hand-drawn. Some were marked as hellbank notes, a mistranslation of Diu, hell, and printed in denominations of thousands or even millions. Others resembled official documents, complete with red ink stamps, seals, and signatures. These papers were designed to be recognized by underworld officials and functioned as bribes, credentials, or travel permits. Among the most fascinating forms is demon paper, ritual documents written in stylized glyphs or mystical script that was believed to be readable only by ghosts and spirits. Used in Daoist and folk exorcisms, these documents could command a spirit to depart, summon a soul from the underworld, or request leniency in judgment. To burn such papers was to activate them. The fire transformed the ink into spirit ink, the paper into spirit paper. The smoke carried the message across the veil. By the Tang Dynasty, the structure of the underworld had become even more elaborate. Drawing upon both Daoist cosmology and Buddhist influence, the Chinese afterlife was increasingly described in terms of 10 courts of hell, Shidian, Yanluo, each ruled by a divine judge or Yama king. These 10 courts functioned like appellate courts in a legal system. Each spirit passed through them in sequence, judged for a different aspect of their life: filial piety, honesty, sexual conduct, violence, and so on. The judgments were meticulous. Clerks recorded deeds, witnesses, sometimes demons, sometimes ancestral spirits, were consulted. In some versions, spirits even had to sign confessions. The punishments famously were brutal: flaying, freezing, boiling, all symbolic retributions for earthly sins. But the process was procedural. The courts were governed by law, and, as on earth, one could sometimes influence the outcome. Families could sponsor rituals to reduce the suffering of a loved one. Paper bribes could be burned. Buddhist monks could chant salvation sutras to rescue a soul from the lower depths. The 10 courts concept, while shaped by Indian Buddhist notions of karma and retribution, was deeply Sinicized, transformed into an administrative schema that echoed the imperial court. Even hell, in China, was run like a ministry. Navigating the bureaucracy of the dead required specialists. By the late imperial period, funeral rituals were often presided over by Daoist priests, Buddhist monks, or ritual masters trained in local traditions. These experts served as intermediaries between the living and the dead, ensuring that the correct documents, offerings, and rites were performed. In many Daoist funerals, the priest would create a passport to the underworld, a document burned during the rite that served as a travel permit for the deceased. Other documents might include a petition for safe passage, a list of sins to be confessed, or a certificate of merit highlighting the good deeds of the deceased, to be presented in judgment. These documents were not mere symbolic gestures. In the minds of the practitioners, they had real efficacy. A name entered into the correct register, a passport delivered to the right court, could mean the difference between a peaceful rebirth and eons of torment. Even the timing of the burial was important. Based on astrological readings, geomantic alignments, and calendrical calculations, experts would determine the most auspicious moment to send off the soul, when the gates of the underworld were open and the documents could be correctly filed. To the modern mind, the idea of a bureaucratic afterlife may seem absurdly literal, but in the context of Chinese religious and philosophical thought, it makes perfect sense. The Chinese world was governed by ritual Li and order Ji. Harmony was not spontaneous. It was maintained through discipline, hierarchy, and procedure. If society functioned best when everyone knew their role and followed the forms, why would the afterlife be any different? This logic also served a powerful emotional function. The grief of death could be mitigated by the assurance that the deceased had not disappeared, but simply transferred to another well-run realm. The living could continue to assist them, with offerings, documents, and prayers, just as one might help a relative navigate a distant bureaucracy. And for the state, this model was politically useful. By projecting the imperial order into the spirit world, rulers reinforced their legitimacy. The emperor was not only the son of heaven, but the earthly counterpart to the celestial administration. The same system ruled above and below. In the Chinese imagination, death is not an erasure. It is a transition from one bureau to another, from one realm of law and order to another. In this world, as in the next, nothing moves without paperwork. Registers, labels, demon paper, these are not curious relics of superstition. They are the spiritual infrastructure of a world that insists on continuity between life and death, between the emperor and the ancestors, between ritual and reality. And in that world, the dead are not lost. They are simply waiting in line. In the next chapter of our series, The Masked Judge, Zhong Kui lives through the medium. We will meet one of the most iconic and fearsome figures of the afterlife, Zhong Kui, the demon queller, ghost hunter, and protector of the living. Through theatrical rites, trance possession, and vivid iconography, his legend reveals how the living fight back against the dangers of the dead, and how the medium becomes the message. But for now, fold the paper, light the fire, stamp it red. The spirits are watching.